Namaskar. This is Akhilesh Bhargav. Welcome to Tit-Bits on Business and Finance with me. The Finance Minister who heads the nation's task force in responding to economic challenges arising out of COVID-19. A couple of days ago, she had already announced a series of measures under which all your compliances under various laws, tax laws and corporate laws in particular, had been postponed by 3 months to the 30th of June. This was, of course, to give relief to all those businessmen and their consultants who are sitting at home and who cannot do the compliances which are needed by 31st of March. Thus, the deadlines got extended. She announced a relief package for the needy, for the poor, the migrant workers and the daily workers. She announced a package to the tune of 1.75 lakh crores under the Prime Minister's Garib Kalyan Yojana, and it primarily consists of two parts: giving relief by way of food and of course giving relief by way of money being put in the accounts of these poor sections of society. There was no package announced, there was no stimulus announced, no revival package announced for any other sector. And she was asked in particular whether and when is there going to be a package being announced for the MSME sector in particular, which is reeling under the effects of the COVID-19 crisis. She was also asked this question whether there are going to be sector specific announcements in order to ensure the industries are supported and stabilized. In response to that, she said that such measures will be announced only if needed. And she also said that at the moment they have announced all those measures which are needed for vulnerable sections of society. Thus, she gave no assurance and only said that only if needed there will be such an announcement. We really think that this statement is disturbing. It is disturbing because many sections of the economy, the MSME sector in particular, and various others are already vulnerable, they are already facing a crisis, and the need is already there to give them succor, to give them relief. But the finance minister said only if needed, which means the government is not yet clear that there are certain sections of the Indian economy which are extremely vulnerable, which are already facing a crisis, and which are certainly in need of relief. Why do we say so? Let's see the journey of how this kind of a crisis unfolds on the economy. We had earlier seen how the crisis spread throughout the world, that was in terms of health. Let us see how it unfolds in terms of the economy, and let's understand why do we say that sectors have already gone vulnerable. The coronavirus crisis is one which spreads because of movement of persons and their contact. It's a contagious disease, and thus the first sectors of the economy which got impacted worldwide because movement of persons has to be stopped, their contact had to be stopped, were airlines, logistics, international trade, travel, tourism, hospitality, conventions and social events. All these have been impacted. They are already vulnerable. They are already in need of relief. In India, already airlines like Indigo and Go Air have announced that their staff needs to go on leave without pay. So many hotels have already retrenched their employees. Tour and travel companies are already facing closures. So they are already vulnerable. The need is already there. Let's go further. Because of this, the contagion of the economic crisis is spreading. In many sectors, persons, staff has been asked to work from home, and that has been done to prevent the spread of the virus. But then, by doing this, the economic impact of the virus is spreading in a devastating manner. It has already resulted in a slowdown of an already slowing economy. We are already in a lockdown mode such that factories, except those that manufacture essential goods, they have been closed down, and we are all at home. What does that mean? Once the workers, the human being sits at home, it means the producer and the consumer both is at home. Both are grounded. Output is suffering, consumption is suffering, cash flows are suffering, liquidity of businesses is suffering, thus investments are suffering, and operating cash flows, profits, turnovers are all receding. What does that mean? That first means that daily wage workers, those who are gig workers or those who are part-time temporary workers, they are certainly going to be impacted immediately, and they have been. Take the case of the textile sector, for example, in Surat. Textile companies, smaller units, even the larger units have been retrenching staff. Many have been closed down. They have retrenched labor, most of which is from UP and Bihar, and they are there on the roads at the moment. Today's relief was given to these workers, and the relief was to ensure that nobody goes hungry to bed. That's something good that was done. But then, what about their employers? Their employers now are facing what we call a financial and economic lockdown, and its impacts are now coming in. And what are those impacts? Because as soon as you see those, you will realize that there is a need for relief for all these sectors. So with these businesses suffering a sudden stoppage of operating cash flows or business cash flows, what is happening? The most obvious, defaults in payment of trade dues, defaults in payment of bank loans, default in payments of EMIs, default in payments of credit card payments, default in payment of rentals, finally layoffs and closure. In the layoffs, these units are not even going to be able to pay the accrued gratuity, etc. to their employees. And this would be the scenario of closure. It is already happening. So, these segments of the MSME enterprises in particular are already vulnerable and they need relief. The government needs to recognize that. The other thing the government needs to recognize is that if a suitable policy doesn't come and closures are across the board and in large number, then reviving those closed units is not going to be easy. And the reason for it is when a unit closes, it closes with a backlog of payments, trade dues, bank loans, EMIs, rentals, workers' dues, etc., as we just discussed. And that acts like a baggage of the past on those units. Till they don't pay it, the revival or the starting of the unit, a restart is not going to take place. And that is where a package is needed. That is where stimulus is needed. That is where the government needs to intervene by realizing that there is already a need for it. Segments of the economy are already vulnerable. And what are we expecting from the government? What we are expecting is the government will need to set the clock back as far as the bank repayments are concerned. Banks will need to be told to not insist on payments for 6 months. A moratorium will have to be given because units are not going to be able to pay it. And unless this relief is not given, closures are imminent, revival will not take place. The second thing that needs to be done is we will need to give some kind of financial assistance in order to ensure that this backlog that we discuss is paid off by those units, and that has to be in the form of some kind of grants. We need to learn from the likes of the US, which has announced a huge stimulus package for the economy, of which $350 billion is by way of loans which will become grants. They will not need to be paid in case the borrowers are using it for payment of staff dues, rentals, etc. We will also need to come up with some kind of financial assistance so as to ensure that this backlog of closure does not become a hindrance for the revival of units. Thus, loans will need to be given, direct financial assistance will need to be given. We will need to also reduce the rate of interest that is charged on loans because enterprises which are on the verge of closure or closed down are not able to pay it. Some kind of a sector-specific tax exemption or tax holiday scheme will also going to be needed in order to ensure that those sectors come back to life. One of the prime ones here is airlines and hospitality. Thus, what we are talking is the fact that sectors of the economy have already been vulnerable. They are in need of a financial assistance package. That package, if it is delayed, is going to result in more closures in the economy, and in that case, the revival of the economy is going to be a much more longer drawn process. We really hope that in the next round of relief measures that the government announces, it would be one which covers all these issues. This is Akhilesh Bhargav signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.
Now be the first to know about the latest updates on our new news app. Go on your Android or iOS, search for HW News Network. Download our app, choose the language you prefer to get updates in, and be up to date with the latest news.